Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Seattle, Washington, on the north shore of Lake Union at the Inside Social headquarters. My name is Joey Kockin, CMO and co-founder of Inside Social, and with me is my co-founder, Brewster Stanislaw, our CEO. Last week, Google had their large conference, Google I/O, covering many of their initiatives, and because Google touches so much of our lives, we thought it would be great to have an episode focused entirely on what they announced and what was important. So we're going to do a socially awkward episode, five questions, 5 minutes, everything that's important from Google I/O, or at least as much as we can fit in this 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started right now. So Brewster, first of all, what were the biggest takeaways? What was most important? What were the overarching themes of Google I/O?
Yeah, so I think with the introduction of Android L, what they're really focusing on is two primary things. And the first is contextual awareness between devices, and the other is cross-device compatibility. I think what Google is really attempting to accomplish is to turn each individual consumer into their own app ecosystem, surrounded by assorted devices which they use that are all powered by Android. And what that looks like is me using my Android phone to control my Android TV, me using my Android watch to control my Android Auto. The idea being that I'm able to understand, and more importantly, the devices can actually understand what I'm doing on one to maximize the effectiveness of another.
Okay, that makes sense. And so in some ways, it really doesn't matter where you are, where you're consuming. Google can go across device, and it's all.
Yeah, and the idea is that wherever you are, wherever you're consuming, the experience is going to be optimized for that, and how the different devices play together.
Great, cool. Well, next, following on that, what does that mean for mobile? Mobile's obviously been hot for a long time now. There's a lot of implications here. What do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is that Android has now crossed a billion users, right, which is really, really meaningful. And it's still, but if you think about total global penetration, it's still a long ways to go. But Android is clearly the dominant platform in terms of size. And I think that's really important for mobile developers to think about. It's still, iOS is better on a per user monetization basis, but in terms of actual size, Android's bigger. And I think the other key thing to think about is that mobile isn't just about the phone. Mobile is about all of the devices we take with us everywhere. A lot of focus is on wearables. They spend a lot of time talking about watches, but the Auto is really a mobile as well. So I think you have to expand the notion of what you think about with mobile. It's not just about smartphone, it's about computing on the go.
Yeah, so in some ways, this is kind of setting themselves up for whatever mobile becomes, even though it may not be something that we.
Yeah, they're building the platform for whatever mobile is, whatever the device is. It's just a series of screens, and sort of, I think the handset will ultimately serve as the chip, basically, that powers the larger distributed ecosystem of devices.
All right, cool. All right, next question. If we could get our clock fixed there, we've been talking about sort of the individual, the consumer. What does this mean for the enterprise?
Well, they introduced Android at Work, which I think is a really big deal, and it really mirrors Google's enterprise strategy with other products. You saw Gmail really take many years and achieve success amongst consumers before they sort of introduce it into the enterprise, and then they went on with other Google apps and Sheets, etc. And they're doing the same thing with Android here. So I think they're going to make a push to own the enterprise. And you've seen, I think iOS has actually been a little bit ahead there. And obviously BlackBerry is the legacy big player. But they recognize that the consumerization of the enterprise is a huge, huge trend. And they're well positioned, given how well they know consumers, to bring these mobile technologies into the enterprise.
All right, great. So the next one is really interesting. We're jumping ahead a little bit here, but they introduced this concept of material design. First, just please explain what that is and what we need to be thinking about it.
Yeah, so material design is Google's new design language, and what it's really about is kind of mimicking the real world, and not in a skeuomorphic way, sort of like Apple's old design language, but more so bringing three-dimensionality and kind of taking the laws of physics that apply in a touchscreen device that didn't previously apply on the web, right? So everything up to this point has really been, even in mobile, has sort of been mirroring web-based design. But because of touch, things get to be different. So now, in the example they use is, imagine a pixel doesn't just have color, it actually has depth, right? So they have a Z value for all pixels that get rendered now. And so it's really kind of a back to reality, so to speak, but again, not skeuomorphic, but showing design that mirrors what we see in our everyday lives, touching the materials that we see, and putting those in a touchscreen device.
So it sort of seems to be in the theme of sort of applying to whatever may come by rooting it in reality, as opposed to defined by whatever device you're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a fair correlation.
All right, cool. So finally, they were on stage, I think, for something like 3 hours. They covered a ton of stuff, but there were a couple of notable absences. So what did they leave out?
Yeah, so the two big things they left out were Google Glass and Google Plus. And I think the reason there is Google Glass is really having a tough time in the PR arena, and it just got outlawed in every cinema in the UK. So I think they didn't want it to be about privacy and Google Glass, and especially when you think about they are building this platform that's meant for everything mobile, of which Glass obviously fits into, and they didn't want that privacy story to kind of take advantage of everything. It was notable that Google Plus wasn't really talked about when, in previous IOs had been the sole focus. I think part of that is that Vic, who led Google Plus, has left Google. But it also somewhat, signals that they're not just going to think about Google Plus as a product and more so as a platform. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start to look at Google Plus as more of a sign-on layer and more infrastructure than really a product.
All right, great. Well, that's Google I/O, and this is Socially Awkward. That was 5 questions in 5 minutes covering the important stuff in digital marketing, and for this case, Google I/O. We'll be back soon, and thanks so much for tuning in.